Ben had dreamed of this day for a long time. After years of hard work, saving every penny, and careful planning, he finally bought his own small house in a quiet neighborhood. It was not a big house, but it was his. To Ben, it was a new beginning, a chance to live peacefully and maybe even rent out a part of it to help with the bills. He had imagined happy days, friendly neighbors, and calm nights. The neighborhood looked perfect. The streets were clean and lined with trees, and there were kids playing in their yards. It was the kind of place where people smiled when they passed each other, where neighbors stopped to chat, and where everyone seemed to care about their homes. Ben felt lucky. On his first day, Ben arrived early in the morning with the moving truck. The sun was just rising, casting a soft golden light over the street. As he opened the door to his new house, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was his new life. But from the moment he stepped out of his car, Ben noticed a pair of sharp eyes watching him. Across the street, an older woman stood near a small white house. She was dressed neatly in a simple dress, her hair pulled back tightly. She held a clipboard and was looking at Ben with a serious expression. Ben waved politely. "Hello," he called, but the woman didn't respond. Instead, she simply nodded once and continued writing on her clipboard. Ben felt a little strange but shrugged it off. Maybe she was just a busy neighbor. As he carried his boxes inside, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw the woman walking toward him. She introduced herself as Mrs. Green, a member of the neighborhood's homeowners association, or HOA. Ben had heard about HOAs but did not know much about how they worked. Mrs. Green smiled tightly. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said. "I just want to remind you about the HOA rules. We all have to follow them to keep the community nice and safe." Ben nodded, hoping this would be easy. Mrs. Green handed him a folder filled with papers. "Please read these carefully. There are rules about how your yard should look, what kind of decorations are allowed, and even the colors you can paint your house." Ben's heart sank a little. He had never imagined there would be so many rules. But he tried to stay positive. "Thank you," he said. "I'll read everything." Mrs. Green gave a small smile. "Good. We like to keep things orderly here." For the next few days, Ben worked hard to make the house ready. He painted the fence white, trimmed the bushes, and planted flowers in the small garden. He wanted his new home to fit in with the rest of the neighborhood. But no matter what he did, Mrs. Green seemed to find something wrong. One afternoon, she knocked on his door. "I noticed your lawn has some weeds," she said sharply. "The HOA rules say all yards must be free of weeds." Ben looked at the small patch she pointed to. It was true, but it was hardly a problem. "I'm working on it," he said calmly. "I'll take care of it soon." Mrs. Green frowned. "You have 24 hours. If not, I will have to report this." Ben felt a chill. This was only the beginning, he thought. Days passed, and the tension grew. Mrs. Green watched everything Ben did. She took pictures of his trash cans, measured the height of his grass, and even counted the number of flower pots on his porch. Whenever Ben tried to talk to her about the rules, she seemed cold and unwilling to explain. One evening, Ben came home late from work, tired and ready to rest. But he found a note slipped under his door. It said, "Complaint filed with the HOA. Your property is not following the rules." Ben's heart pounded. He didn't understand what was happening. He had tried so hard to do the right thing. Why was Mrs. Green making his life so difficult? He decided to attend the next HOA meeting, hoping to speak and clear things up. But when he arrived, Mrs. Green was already there, surrounded by other neighbors who nodded when she spoke. "Ben," she said with a sharp smile, "we must all follow the rules. Your property has many issues." Ben tried to explain, but she interrupted him. We will take action if things don't improve. That night, Ben lay awake, feeling worried and confused. He had never imagined that moving to a quiet neighborhood would turn into such a struggle. The woman who was supposed to be welcoming was instead making his life difficult. As the weeks went on, Ben learned that Mrs. Green had a strong influence in the HOA. She seemed to enjoy pointing out mistakes and reporting small problems. But Ben was determined not to give up. He wanted to prove that he could be a good neighbor and that he deserved to live in peace. Still, every day brought new challenges. Ben didn't know that Mrs. Green had already planned to make things worse and that soon, he would discover a secret that would change everything. Ben thought that things might get easier after the HOA meeting, but he was wrong. Every day, Mrs. Green found something new to complain about. It was as if she watched him from dawn till dusk, waiting for him to make a small mistake. And the worst part was, the other neighbors started to listen to her. One morning, Ben woke up to see a group of cars parked on his lawn. Confused, he stepped outside. A few people he barely knew stood talking quietly, pointing at his house. Ben recognized one of them from the last HOA meeting, a man who usually stayed silent but now looked upset. "Good morning," Ben said, trying to stay calm. "Is there a problem?" One of the neighbors looked at him and said, "The HOA said you're breaking more rules. Some say you're not allowed to park cars on the grass." Ben looked down. It was true, he had parked his car there the night before because the driveway was full. It was a small mistake, but he hadn't thought it was serious. He apologized and promised to move his car immediately. But the group didn't seem satisfied. Mrs. Green appeared at that moment, holding her clipboard. "Ben," she said coldly, "you must follow all the rules exactly. No exceptions. If you do not fix this now, I will call the police." Ben's heart sank. Why did she want to make things so hard? He moved his car and hoped it would be enough. But that same afternoon, Ben received a phone call. The voice on the other end was polite but serious. "This is Officer Miller from the local police department," the voice said. "We received a complaint about parking violations at your address." Ben was shocked. He explained what had happened, how he had already moved the car. The officer thanked him and said they would check the situation, but Ben knew that this was just the beginning. Days later, he heard a knock on his door. It was the police, this time with a report in hand. "Mr. Ben, we came to inform you that the HOA has filed several complaints against your property," said one officer. "We advise you to resolve these issues quickly to avoid further action." Ben felt like the world was closing in on him. He had never had trouble with the police before. He was just trying to live his life. That evening, Ben sat on his small porch, staring at the stars. His mind was full of questions. Why was Mrs. Green so angry? What did he do wrong? He decided to ask his neighbor, Mr. Patel, a kind man who had lived on the street for many years. Mr. Patel listened carefully as Ben explained the problems with Mrs. Green and the HOA. Then he sighed. "Ben," Mr. Patel said softly, "Mrs. Green has always been like this. She likes to control everything in the neighborhood. But sometimes, she takes it too far." Ben nodded. "But why? What does she want?" Mr. Patel looked at him for a moment and said, "I don't know. Maybe power. Maybe she just likes feeling important. But you should be careful. She can cause trouble." Ben thanked Mr. Patel and went back home, feeling a little stronger. At least he was not alone. The next day, Ben tried harder to follow all the HOA rules. He mowed the lawn carefully, cleaned the gutters, and removed any item that looked suspicious. But no matter what he did, Mrs. Green was not satisfied. One afternoon, Ben received a letter from the HOA. It said that a formal complaint had been filed against him for disturbing the peace and creating unsafe conditions. Ben was confused. He did not understand what they meant. He called the HOA office and asked for more information. A calm voice told him there was a report of loud noises coming from his property during the night. Ben was shocked. He knew this was not true. He was a quiet man, and he worked during the day. Ben wondered who could have made such a false complaint. His mind went back to Mrs. Green. Could she be behind this? Determined to prove his innocence, Ben installed a small security camera outside his house. He wanted to catch whoever was causing trouble. For days, the cameras showed nothing unusual. Then one night, Ben saw something strange on the video. A figure was near his window, shining a flashlight and moving around his yard. The next morning, Ben showed the video to the police. They promised to investigate but warned him to stay careful. Ben felt scared but also angry. Someone was trying to hurt him, and the neighborhood that he had hoped would be a safe place was turning into a nightmare. Then came the moment that changed everything. One afternoon, Ben received a letter from the HOA with a strange note: "Important meeting. Your presence is required. New information about your property." Curious and nervous, Ben decided to attend the meeting. When he arrived, he saw Mrs. Green standing at the front, holding a folder. The room was full of neighbors, and many of them were looking at Ben with cold eyes. Mrs. Green began to speak. "We have discovered that the owner of the rental property is one of us. Someone who has lived here quietly for many years." Ben's heart beat fast. He was confused. Then Mrs. Green said, "Yes, Ben, you are the landlord of this house. And you have not told us." Ben realized then that Mrs. Green did not know who he really was. For the first time, the room fell silent. Ben took a deep breath and said, "Yes, I am the landlord. I bought this house months ago. I wanted to be a good neighbor and follow all the rules." Mrs. Green froze. The anger in her eyes turned to shock. The neighbors looked at each other, surprised. Ben continued, "I did not try to hide anything. I only wanted to live here peacefully. I do not understand why there is so much trouble." Mrs. Green's voice softened. I didn't know." The meeting ended quietly. Ben left with mixed feelings: relief that the secret was out, but also fear of what would come next. He knew that his fight was not over. But now, he had a chance to start again. The room was silent after Mrs. Green's sudden discovery. Everyone's eyes were on Ben. The woman who had been his biggest critic, the one who called the police and filed complaints, now looked confused and unsure. Ben felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, surprise, and a little hope. Mrs. Green finally broke the silence. "Ben," she said slowly, "I didn't know you were the landlord. If I had known, maybe I wouldn't have been so harsh." Ben looked at her carefully. "Why did you act this way? Why did you make things so hard for me?" Mrs. Green hesitated. Then, quietly, she said, "I was trying to protect the neighborhood. I thought, someone new might not care about our rules or the community. I was wrong." The neighbors murmured in agreement. Some nodded, others looked away. Ben realized that many of them trusted Mrs. Green's judgment, even if it was sometimes too strict. Ben took a deep breath. "I understand wanting to keep the neighborhood nice. But there is a better way to do it. We should talk, help each other, not fight." Mrs. Green nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right." After the meeting, Ben felt a strange calm. For the first time in weeks, he thought things might change. Maybe the neighbors would accept him, and he could finally feel at home. Over the next few days, Ben tried to reach out. He fixed a broken fence that belonged to Mrs. Green's house. He helped Mrs. Davis carry groceries. He smiled and greeted every neighbor he met. Some neighbors smiled back. Some even started talking to him. Mrs. Green's attitude also seemed to soften. She no longer watched him with suspicion. Instead, she occasionally nodded or said hello. One morning, Ben received a letter from the HOA. It said the complaints against his property were dropped. The HOA was willing to work with him. Ben felt a lightness he had not felt before. But he knew that real trust would take time. However, just as things seemed to get better, Ben noticed a new problem. The security camera he had installed caught some strange noises late at night. It was not the figure with the flashlight anymore, but faint whispers and footsteps near his house. One night, Ben stayed up waiting. At midnight, he saw shadows moving outside his window. When he stepped outside, no one was there. Ben's heart raced. He wanted to believe the neighbors were friendly now. But something still felt wrong. He talked to Mr. Patel again. "Mr. Patel, do you think someone is trying to scare me?" Mr. Patel looked serious. "Maybe. Sometimes, even neighbors can be unkind. But don't lose hope." Ben decided to take extra care. He fixed the front door lock and asked a friend to stay with him a few nights. Meanwhile, Ben began learning more about the neighborhood. He found out that years ago, Mrs. Green had been in charge of the HOA. Many people respected her because she had worked hard to keep the area clean. But over time, some neighbors had grown tired of her strict rules. Some wanted more freedom to decorate or live how they liked. Ben understood now why Mrs. Green was so protective. She wanted to keep the neighborhood the way it had always been. One afternoon, Ben invited Mrs. Green for tea. He wanted to talk honestly, to clear the air. Mrs. Green arrived, looking more relaxed than usual. They sat in Ben's small kitchen, sipping tea. "Ben," she said, "I see now that I was wrong. I judged you without really knowing you." Ben smiled gently. "We both want what's best for the neighborhood. Maybe we can work together." Mrs. Green nodded. "Yes. Let's try." Over the next weeks, Ben and Mrs. Green began working side by side. They helped organize a small cleanup day, inviting neighbors to plant flowers and fix fences. Slowly, more people joined. The mood on the street changed. The children played outside more often. Neighbors shared stories and laughed together. Ben felt proud. He had turned a difficult situation into a chance for friendship. One evening, as Ben sat on his porch watching the sunset, Mrs. Green came over with a small basket of cookies. "Thank you, Ben," she said quietly, "for your patience and kindness." Ben smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Green, for giving me a chance." Just as Ben felt everything was finally falling into place, he received a call that brought a sudden shock. The city was planning new rules for the neighborhood, rules that could change everything. Ben knew that the real test was still ahead. But for the first time, he was ready to face it not alone, but with neighbors who had begun to trust him. Ben felt hopeful after the recent changes in the neighborhood. For the first time, he believed things could really improve. He had started to feel like he belonged, like this small house was truly his home. The neighbors smiled when they passed by, Mrs. Green even waved, and the small community seemed warmer than before. One quiet morning, as Ben checked his mailbox, he found an official letter from the city government. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The letter explained that new city rules were coming soon. These rules would affect the whole neighborhood, including the rental properties. The new rules were strict. They said landlords must meet higher standards for safety and property maintenance. They also limited the number of renters allowed in certain areas and required more paperwork for each tenant. The city wanted to make sure neighborhoods stayed safe and clean, but the rules also made things more complicated. Ben read the letter again. The deadlines were close, and the paperwork was confusing. He worried about how he could manage all this, especially with the past problems he had faced. He decided to attend the next HOA meeting to discuss the new rules. Maybe the neighbors could help. At the meeting, the room was full. Many neighbors had heard about the new city rules and were concerned. Some were worried about higher fees and inspections. Others were scared that their quiet streets would change. Mrs. Green stood up first. "We must prepare for these changes," she said firmly. "This is our chance to show the city we care about our neighborhood." Ben nodded. He saw a new side of Mrs. Green, one that wanted to work together for the community's future. After the meeting, Ben stayed behind to talk to her. "Mrs. Green, these rules are hard to understand. I don't know if I can manage them alone," Ben said honestly. Mrs. Green looked at him thoughtfully. "Ben, I will help you. We can face this together." That night, Ben felt relief. Maybe the past was behind them, and a new friendship was beginning. But the next day, trouble found him again. Ben received a call from one of his tenants, Anna. She sounded upset. "Ben, the city inspector came today," Anna said. "He said the house has some problems, and we need to fix them fast." Ben frowned. He hadn't been home to check everything lately. Between work and the HOA meetings, he had little time. He promised Anna he would come over and see what needed fixing. When Ben arrived at the rental house, he noticed the front porch had loose boards, and the kitchen sink was leaking. Small problems, but important. Ben spent the next few days fixing everything. He called a plumber and bought new wood for the porch. He wanted to keep his tenant safe and happy. But even as he worked, Mrs. Green warned him. "Ben, remember, the city will be watching closely. Any mistake can cause fines or worse." Ben nodded, feeling the pressure. One afternoon, as Ben was fixing the porch, a car slowly drove by. Ben looked up and saw Mr. Collins, another neighbor, watching him carefully. "Hello, Mr. Collins," Ben called. Mr. Collins didn't answer but continued to stare. Ben felt uneasy. Even though some neighbors had begun to accept him, others still seemed suspicious. That evening, Ben sat with Mrs. Green and Mr. Patel to talk about the new rules. "We must stay united," Mrs. Green said. "If the city sees division, they might take stronger actions." Mr. Patel agreed. "Ben, this is your chance to show you care. The community will watch closely." Ben felt ready. He knew it would be hard, but he wanted to prove that he was a good landlord and neighbor. Weeks passed, and Ben worked harder than ever. He made sure the rental house was clean, safe, and beautiful. He helped Anna with her needs and even organized a small garden party for the tenants and neighbors. Slowly, the tension in the neighborhood eased. Some neighbors thanked Ben for his efforts. Mrs. Green smiled more often and even shared advice about keeping the yard tidy. One evening, after a long day, Ben received a surprising visit. It was the city inspector, Mr. Harris. "Good evening, Ben," Mr. Harris said with a warm smile. "I wanted to see your property myself." Ben showed him around the house. The inspector looked carefully at the repairs and the garden. After a few minutes, Mr. Harris nodded. "Everything looks good. You have done a fine job." Ben felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you," Ben said. "I want to keep the neighborhood safe and happy." Mr. Harris smiled. "That's the spirit. Keep it up." The next day, Ben told Mrs. Green about the visit. She nodded. "You're proving yourself, Ben. The neighborhood is lucky to have you." For the first time, Ben believed that he could overcome the challenges. He knew that the road ahead was still long, but he wasn't afraid. Together, with Mrs. Green and the neighbors, Ben was ready to face whatever came next. After the city inspector's visit, things seemed to be going well for Ben. The complaints had stopped, neighbors were friendlier, and even Mrs. Green had begun to respect him. For the first time since moving into the neighborhood, Ben felt hopeful. But just as life seemed to settle, Ben's past caught up with him in an unexpected way. One afternoon, while checking the mail, Ben found a letter with no return address. The envelope was plain, but inside, he discovered a series of photographs and a note. The photos showed parts of his rental house, damaged walls, peeling paint, and old furniture scattered inside. The note was simple but cold: "You think you can fool us? We know the truth." Ben's heart sank. He had worked hard to fix every problem, to make the house safe and clean. Who could have sent this? And why? He looked closely at the photos. They seemed old, taken before he bought the house. But someone was trying to use them against him. Ben decided to talk to Anna, his tenant. "Anna," he asked carefully, "do you know anything about these photos?" Anna shook her head. "No, Ben. The house was a bit messy when I moved in, but you fixed everything quickly." Ben felt confused and worried. Someone was trying to ruin his reputation. The next day, Ben went to the HOA office to ask if anyone had complaints or new reports against him. The secretary looked surprised. "No, Mr. Ben. We haven't received anything new." Ben realized this was more than just neighborhood tension. Someone was deliberately trying to sabotage him. He remembered the strange noises near his house, the late-night whispers, and the suspicious neighbors who watched him closely. Ben knew he had to be careful. That evening, Mrs. Green called Ben. "Ben, I heard about the photos," she said softly. "This isn't right. Someone is playing games." Ben sighed. "I don't know who, Mrs. Green. But I feel like they want to make me leave." Mrs. Green was silent for a moment. Then she said, "We can't let that happen. I will talk to the HOA and the neighbors. We need to stand together." Ben felt grateful. Despite their past disagreements, Mrs. Green was now an ally. Together, they planned to hold a neighborhood meeting to talk openly about the problems. On the day of the meeting, many neighbors gathered in the small community hall. Some looked curious, others cautious. Ben stood at the front, feeling nervous but determined. "I want to thank you all for coming," he began. "I know there have been problems, misunderstandings, and even some hurt feelings. But I want you to know that I care about this neighborhood. I want to be a good landlord and a good neighbor." He showed the photos and explained how someone had sent them to hurt his reputation. Some neighbors gasped. Others looked shocked. Mrs. Green stepped forward. "We will not let fear or suspicion divide us. We must work together to protect our community." A few neighbors nodded. Slowly, the room filled with quiet agreement. One man raised his hand. "Ben, maybe we can help you check the houses and keep an eye out for real problems. Together, we can make things better." Ben smiled. That would mean a lot. The meeting ended on a hopeful note. Ben felt stronger, knowing he was not alone. But the mystery of the photos still bothered him. He decided to investigate quietly. He talked to other landlords in nearby neighborhoods, asking if they had faced similar problems. A kind woman named Sarah told him, "Sometimes, people are jealous or afraid of change. They try to scare new landlords to keep things as they are." Ben nodded. "That makes sense." Sarah offered to help Ben with legal advice and paperwork. Ben felt lucky to have met her. Meanwhile, Anna, his tenant, thanked Ben for standing up for her and the house. "Ben," she said, "you're more than a landlord. You're a friend." Ben smiled, feeling a warmth inside. Days turned into weeks. Ben worked hard to keep the property in good shape, attended HOA meetings, and helped neighbors when he could. Slowly, the shadows of doubt began to fade. One morning, as Ben watered the garden, Mrs. Green came by with a tray of cookies. "Ben," she said, "I'm sorry for how things started between us. I was strict because I cared. Now I see that kindness matters more." Ben thanked her. "I'm glad we found common ground." Mrs. Green smiled. "Let's keep building this neighborhood, together." Ben looked around at the quiet street, the blooming flowers, and the smiling faces. He knew the journey was far from over, but he was ready. Because sometimes, even in the hardest times, people can change. And a neighborhood can become a true home. The neighborhood was slowly changing, and so was Ben. The constant tension and struggles had taught him a lot about patience, kindness, and community. Now, with Mrs. Green's support and the neighbors beginning to trust him, Ben felt more confident than ever. One sunny morning, Ben woke up early and looked out the window. The garden outside his house was blooming with bright flowers, thanks to the little garden party they had organized. Children played on the street, and neighbors greeted each other with smiles. Ben took a deep breath. This was the peaceful life he wanted. At the next HOA meeting, the topic was different. Instead of complaints, they talked about improving the neighborhood. Ideas flowed freely. Some wanted a small park, others suggested a community library, and a few hoped for a neighborhood watch group. Mrs. Green spoke with new energy. We have faced many problems, but now we have a chance to make this place better. Let's work together. Ben raised his hand. I would like to help organize a community garden. It can bring people together and beautify our street. Several neighbors nodded, including Mr. Patel and Anna. The idea was met with smiles and applause. Over the next few weeks, Ben and a group of volunteers worked hard. They cleaned empty lots, planted flowers, and built small benches. The neighborhood slowly transformed. One afternoon, as Ben and Mrs. Green planted a tree, she said, "Ben, I'm proud of what we've done. You showed me that change is possible." Ben smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Green. Without your help, I couldn't have done this." Mrs. Green looked thoughtful. "I want to apologize for the way I treated you before. Sometimes, fear makes people act harshly." Ben nodded. "I understand. I'm glad we found a way to move forward." Meanwhile, Ben continued to manage the rental house with care. Anna and her family were happy, and Ben made sure everything was safe and comfortable. One evening, Anna came to Ben's door with a small gift. "Thank you, Ben, for everything you've done. This neighborhood feels like home now." Ben felt warm inside. "You're welcome, Anna. I'm glad to have you here." But even with the good times, Ben never forgot the lessons he had learned. He knew that trust was fragile and could be broken easily. One day, while walking through the neighborhood, Ben noticed a new family moving in. The young couple looked around nervously, carrying boxes into their new home. Ben approached them with a friendly smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Ben, the landlord of the rental house nearby." The woman smiled back. "Thank you. We've heard so much about the community here." Ben nodded. "We work together to keep it safe and friendly. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." The couple seemed relieved. "That means a lot. We look forward to getting to know everyone." As the sun set, Ben watched the neighbors chatting and laughing together. He thought about the difficult journey he had traveled from suspicion and fear to friendship and hope. He realized that being a landlord was more than just managing a property. It was about building relationships, earning trust, and helping create a home. That night, as Ben sat on his porch, he felt a deep sense of peace. The past troubles still lingered in his memory, but they no longer controlled him. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "This is just the beginning." Months had passed since Ben first moved into the neighborhood. The road had been rocky, full of misunderstandings and conflicts, but now the air felt lighter. Ben had learned that building trust was a slow process, but with patience and kindness, even the hardest walls could be broken. One warm afternoon, the neighborhood gathered for a small celebration in the park near Ben's house. The community garden was blooming, colorful flowers filled the space, and children ran happily, chasing butterflies. Tables were set with food and drinks, and laughter floated in the air. Ben stood near the garden, watching the neighbors talk and smile. He felt a deep satisfaction. This was what he had hoped for, a place where people cared about each other. Mrs. Green approached him, holding a small box wrapped in bright paper. She smiled warmly. "Ben, this is for you." Ben was surprised. "For me?" "Yes," she said. "A thank you for everything you've done. For your hard work, patience, and kindness." Ben opened the box carefully. Inside was a small plaque with the words, "To Ben, a neighbor and friend who helped us grow together." His eyes grew moist. "Thank you, Mrs. Green. That means more than you know." Mrs. Green nodded. "We all make mistakes, Ben. What matters is how we move forward." The celebration continued late into the evening. Stories were shared, new friendships formed, and old worries seemed to fade away. Later that night, Ben sat on his porch, thinking about how far he had come. He remembered the early days when Mrs. Green had called the cops, the late-night whispers that had frightened him, and the moments when he had felt alone and unwanted. But through it all, Ben never gave up. He kept trying to connect, to listen, and to help. He looked up at the stars and smiled. This neighborhood is home now. The next morning, Ben received a call from the city office. The new rules were in place, but thanks to the neighborhood's effort, the city was happy with the progress. They planned to work more closely with communities like his to make neighborhoods safe and welcoming. Ben shared the good news with Mrs. Green and the neighbors. They celebrated this victory as a team. Days turned into weeks, and life in the neighborhood continued to improve. Ben helped organize more community events, a book exchange, a weekend cleanup, and even a small holiday party. One day, a young boy named Tommy ran up to Ben. "Mr. Ben, can I help you plant flowers in the garden?" Ben smiled. "Of course, Tommy. Let's do it together." As they planted seeds side by side, Ben realized something important. This was the real success, not just fixing houses or following rules, but building a community where everyone belonged. Years later, when people talked about the neighborhood, they remembered how it had changed. From a place of suspicion and fights to a place of friendship and support. And Ben's name was always part of that story. One afternoon, as Ben walked down the street, Mrs. Green stopped him. "Ben," she said softly, "thank you for showing us what it means to be a true neighbor." Ben smiled. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Together, they looked at the street filled with happy families and blooming gardens. The neighborhood had grown, just like the flowers they planted. And in that quiet moment, Ben knew he had finally found peace.